In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus.
Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen.
In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Brethren in Christ, laudetur Jesus Christus. This is Timothy Flanders with the meaning of Catholic. Jesus is King. You are listening or watching to the Terror of Demons morning show, reclaiming traditional Catholic masculinity. As always, with co-host Kennedy Hall. How you doing, brother? Let me see. You've muted yourself, Kennedy.
It's all right. When I pressed unmute for the prayer. Right, and then I think anyway, technology. I'm living the dream as always.
Right, you are still living the dream in Canada. Good.
We are living the dream.
Is not dead. Still burning bright.
Some dreams are nightmares. But
as Kennedy can tell, as everyone can see with Kennedy's green screen background, the glorious Quebec Sacred Heart Sacré-Cœur.
Yeah, the Carillon de Sacré-Cœur.
What does the first word mean? Carillon.
Carillon.
Is that
I don't know. I've only ever used it in French. I've never thought about translating it. It's one of those implicit words.
Okay. Just like the banner of the Sacred Heart or something?
Yeah, pretty much. I guess that's what you say, carillon, something like that. We have an election coming up. Speaking of living the dream, which is a big deal, actually, because I don't know. I don't know if our elections are as, let's say, manipulatable as the U.S. version. We actually have voter ID here. Weirdly enough, there's all these things that in the States they'll say, oh, that's conservative, that's right wing, that's racist. Or we actually have all those things here because in the most of the world, they're just obviously it's a political opportunistic thing to say that voter ID is racist. But here in Canada, we just have it because that's just sort of sensible. Not that Canada's more sensible than the U.S., but you know what I'm saying. And but the country's so much smaller population-wise that it's actually relatively easy to control identification. Let's be honest. It's not like there's 400 million people voting or whatever. So we have an election being called. So here's the thing, my friends. Canada is, and we'll talk about this throughout the show, but Canada is a Catholic nation historically. Not just crypto, not just implicitly, but actually. Okay. Canada is New France. Okay. There were some First Nations tribes here, but 100,000 people maybe in the nation that's 2/3 the size of Russia. You know,
and by 1900, half of them were Catholic too.
That's right.
The First Nations. Yeah,
that's right. So if any country can say it's Catholic, France, Spain, whatever, those places were pagan before they were Christian too. So the ironic thing is that Canada is as historically Catholic in its roots and foundation as almost any nation in Europe. And Quebec is huge. Look at a map. Quebec is run by a demon today, François Legault. She's a bloody lunatic. But anyway, Canada was historically very Catholic. And not only is it Catholic insofar as the history, but there's actually a huge devotion in the church, which is coming back right now, or growing right now, and is not taken for granted in the sense of people aren't grateful, but it's just taken for granted that it's been around forever. This devotion actually wasn't necessarily spread far and wide under the same name. Bonjour aux Canadiens. Oh, that's from Lario. There you go.
I believe he's a Frenchman in France, if I recall.
Bien, un vrai français, pas français mieux que moi. But the devotion to the Holy Family actually is a devotion that people, obviously it's ubiquitous in people's lives nowadays, but it was essentially promoted first in a most official sense in the Diocese of Quebec, and it was by Bishop Laval. And Bishop Laval he was the first bishop of the Diocese of Quebec. And today, if you go to Quebec today, which Quebec has just instituted starting September, they're going to have some sort of vaccination passport for going to do anything, basically, besides grocery store. Although there's hundreds of thousands of people riding every weekend, so we'll see how that goes. But today, Quebec still has the names of saints, and not just, it's kind of like when you go to people don't realize when they're in the city of Sacramento, it's like, you're in a city called the Holy Eucharist. Essentially, it's the same thing in Quebec. There's neighborhoods, called like Seven Sorrows, and there's just amazing saintly things everywhere. So I really pray that one day there'll be retrofitting of Quebec to Catholicism, because it would be like just it'd be like switching a light on again. It would just happen because it's already all there. But nonetheless, the devotion to the Holy Family is actually something that was promulgated.
Oh, we lost Kennedy. We were having a few technical difficulties right before we went on the air. But let me just fill in what he was about to say. And he was about to tell you about the oratory of St. Joseph, which hopefully we can get some photos of that, because it's absolutely amazing. But before we get into the topic of St. Joseph, Kennedy, were you about to get into our main topic, or were you just about to say Canada's awesome because they're
actually? I was going to get there in a second, because there's some significance to this election that's been called.
Oh, okay. Tell us about that, because I wanted to promote Kennedy Profession and stuff. So, and talk about the film. So tell us about Canada.
Yes. Well, okay. So I'm going to put a link here quickly for it's the Canadian Saints, and it's about Bishop, and he's actually Blessed Bishop de Laval, so he is a saint. I mean, essentially. So this election for us was called on Sunday. Sunday was the Assumption, unless you're in the Novus Ordo, and then it was yesterday, I guess. So anyway, Sunday was the day that Justin Trudeau, who himself is a Catholic, baptized Catholic, and he called an election for September the 20th. So there's 5 weeks until this election, and this is a very big deal for us here. And I'm asking everyone to pray harder than they've ever prayed for anything before, because we're at a crossroads here in Canada where they've just announced that there's some sort of vaccination passport in order to fly domestically. It remains to be seen what's going to happen with that, and exemptions, and maybe you can do a test and fly or something. But it's heating up, and this election is all about the medication, let's call it that. And the places that have lost their minds the most in Canada are Ontario and Quebec, both the places that historically were founded by Catholics, literally Christian missionaries and things. And Justin Trudeau being at the helm, I don't know, there's something in maybe I'm over spiritualizing it, but there was an election called on the Assumption at a time when it's the Catholic leaders of our country that are leading us into hell, essentially. So I'm asking everyone to, out of their charity, really consider the role of St. Joseph and the Holy Family as the only way to essentially save Canada. And I mean, you've all heard the news the last couple months about the churches being burned down. I mean, there really is the Catholic question is so much at the forefront of the Canadian experience right now, even more so in the States. I mean, yeah, Joe Biden is the Catholic president. That's kind of a political tool, but we literally have been having it stopped, thankfully. But literally, our prime minister has stoked fear and anger in people to the point where our churches have been burned to the ground because they're Catholic. You know, it really is a very strange moment. And I can announce this as well. I did get hired. I did get hired by LifeSite, and I'm a full-time journalist with LifeSite as well. And we had and LifeSite is a Canadian company. People don't know this. It actually started by a couple of different men, John Henry Weston and Steve Jalsevec, I believe you pronounce his name. They were pro-life leaders, fighters for the Campaign Life Coalition, which is a big pro-life organization here that's been doing amazing work for 4 or 5 decades at this point. And there's something majorly, I'm trying to put this into words, think about Canada is very small as far as population goes. We're not really an international player in a lot of ways, but man, are we smack in the middle of this Ephesians 6 battle between good and evil. And LifeSite, for example, is probably the biggest and most widely known truly Christian English language speaking news service on earth. Let's be honest, probably at this point, 10, 15 million unique page views a month. They're huge. And as far as that goes, and there's something right now, this battle being played out in the world that we're all living through. There's something very unique about the place of Canada in this. It's I've been trying to wrap my head around it, why it's so, but I think here in the Western world and in North America and the new world, I guess, Canada really does represent, at least for North America, the Catholic question, the real question of the old world and Christendom versus the new modernist reality, because that's something that we're living through right now, the playing out of that in a very large degree. And last year, you guys really felt it in your election when, yes, Trump was obviously very flawed, but there was this feeling that this is good versus evil. This is people who believe in virtues versus people who want to burn things down. We're going through a similar thing right now here in Canada, and there are only 5 weeks left until the election. I'm not expecting, I believe the Liberals will win. Our Conservatives are just as bad. The Conservative leader has come out and said he doesn't believe that there should be vaccination passports to fly in your own country, but you should have to get tested every time you fly if you're not vaccinated. So, you're such a hero. He himself is a baptized Catholic, Aaron O'Toole, Irishman, but is pro-choice and all this kind of stuff. So that's where we are right now. And I'm asking everyone to, in their charity, please develop a devotion to the Holy Family, which is, we might even call it a Canadian devotion, or at least a New France devotion, which is fun. And also, it's been said by various, I'd have to check my notes, but it's been said by various saints and mystics and so forth that as things edge towards chastisement and the coming renewal and all this stuff that we've been promised through Fatima and all these places, but as it ramps up, that devotion to Saint Joseph will grow. That's what's been said apparently, and we see this at Fatima with the last apparition, right? With the miracle of the Sun, we see Christ the child Christ is being held by Saint Joseph, and Joseph himself acts as priest and gives the world a priestly blessing, which just says a lot about his authority over temporal affairs. And that in and of itself, we know from our Fatima series, was a Freemasonic versus Christendom battle. That's what was happening in Fatima. Portugal was a microcosm of what happened. And after the renewal after the consecration of Portugal to the Immaculate Heart of Mary in the way that Our Lady requested, that country had a golden age of almost 40 years of true, you talk to Portuguese people today who have, I grew up with a lot of Portuguese guys who moved over from the Azores and various places in Portugal. And it's amazing. Like they just, how Portugal, even after the Second Vatican Council, was really Catholic, like not just culturally, but every aspect of life. And anyway, so it was, there's a moment right now where we're looking down the barrel of a gun here in Canada with the way things are going. And we don't have any temporal, there's a political party that might do something okay, maybe get a few seats and be a thorn in the fly in the ointment, but there's nothing, there's no hope of winning on a temporal sense the culture war. There's none of that. So we need everyone's help, and we need Saint Joseph more than we've ever needed him. So I'm asking people to consider developing a devotion to Saint Joseph and the Holy Family, and considering Canada in your prayers. And that's about it, I guess. So that's kind of where we're at right now. So the timing, I think, is a little bit providential.
Excellent. Yes, the year of Saint Joseph.
Yeah.
And your book being re-released very soon, Terror of Demons, named after Saint Joseph. Canada is the anchor of North American Christendom to the north, as Guadalupe and Mexico is the anchor to the south, continually combated by the American Empire since the beginning. And so we need these two Catholic anchors to advance Christendom across the border into the American Empire and into the hearts and souls of their own people. So yes, let's pray as we do that, knowing, as Psalm 21 says, the kingdom belongs to the Lord and he rules the nations. This week is the 12th week after Pentecost. Today is the feast of Saint Beatriz de Silva. We also have Saint John Eudes. And Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, and Saint Jane Francis de Chantal. And just a reminder to everyone, you can get an advanced copy of my book coming in the fall, God willing, in October. Become a patron, patreon.com/meaningofcatholic. The book is called City of God versus City of Man, and it's a 1-volume history for the common layman to talk about the spiritual aspect. It's a spiritual history of culture. And so it's defining what we mean by culture, trying to get at the root of these things, and trying to get at the root of our struggle, City of God versus City of Man. And Kennedy, you were hired at LifeSite, and I was hired as the editor of 1 Peter 5. And so this week at 1 Peter 5, we have today we have an article from Poland, the reaction of Poland to the motu proprio. Talk about Poland, the Polish Church, an anchor of Christendom in Europe, certainly. And tomorrow we have a great article coming from Kwasniewski, which is talking about a possible hidden history of the motu proprio and uncovering something very, very interesting. So stay tuned for Wednesday. On Saturday, we're starting a very important series at 1 Peter 5, and I'm really excited to unveil that. So stay tuned at 1 Peter 5. That's coming soon. And Kennedy, anything you'd like to share that's coming soon out of LifeSite or Kennedy Profession?
LifeSite's going to be ramping up. We're going to be ramping up our video production. It's actually a really remarkable story how LifeSite started. And this last year, there were very few media outlets, let's say. Basically, put it this way, the story of LifeSite is long ago, or I guess it was early 90s. The story of how it started. John Henry Weston, he actually lives in a very remote area in Ontario. I won't give away his location, but very remote. Like a place where I'm like, whoa,
log cabin.
That's like basically
log cabin with solar panels. Yeah,
like to the point where the internet is barely there, which is so ironic because he runs LifeSite. So the lengths he has to go to use the internet is pretty crazy. So the story he was telling stories about when it first started, because he himself was he almost did his PhD. He had a master's in psychology. Was going down a very secular route. Steve, the co-founder who worked for Campaign Life Coalition, very big pro-life organization here. he believed that it was like that John Henry was a mole from like Planned Parenthood or something, because he couldn't believe that this guy who was so eminently qualified and was on this path to having this big secular career just decided John Henry was at mass one day and praying about this and the other thing, and he prayed and he needed a job and he needed to do something for God or whatever. And some lady, one of those stories, some lady comes up to him after mass and is like, "Do you want a job?" And he was given this basically salesman job to sell this newspaper called The Interim, which was a pro-life Canadian newspaper. This is like no money. Like you're not going to make any money. Like it's like you're going to do this basically almost as volunteer, and maybe you might barely pay your mortgage. And I don't think he had like 3 kids at the time and just married and stuff. And so the co-founder was like, there's no way that you want this job. What, are you a mole? Like, are you a plant here from Planned Parenthood? Like this eminently qualified guy wants to come make no money for us. I don't understand this. But John Henry really wanted to. He's just like, I want to do something for God, for pro-life. And he's a really wonderful man. And so he tells stories about when they first started. He would turn his computer on at, this is all dial-up. He would turn his computer on like 2 hours before he'd start working. So it took 2 hours to load the actual software. So it basically, like, at dinner time, he would turn his computer on, and then by the time the kids were in bed, it would finally load it 2 hours later. And it's just an amazing story. So LifeSite has exploded since then. It really has. And the last year and a half has been massive for them, because with the whole respiratory illness everybody's thinking about, they were one of the first places to really just ask all the questions. What is it, a lab? Was it a thing? Was it serious? Was it not? Is it a plague? Is it the judgment? Is it what? I mean, just asking questions, and they just go there where nobody else goes. So their readership has exploded, and videos have exploded for them. So LifeSite's actually from Ontario, Canada, and they have a headquarters as well in Front Royal, Virginia. But we can't go down there. We can't go visit our colleagues. So we had our conference last week, and we're sitting up here at a location in Canada, conferencing with those in the States. And there's about 30 or 40 of the employees are in America, and about 10 to 15 are here, and a few are in the UK, and one in Spain, I think. So we have to ramp up the video production up here in Canada, because we can't get down to the States and all this kind of stuff, and there's a need for it. But LifeSite got kicked off YouTube. So now they're deciding Rumble and banned video, which is the InfoWars server and stuff, and lots of stuff going on. So look for lots of LifeSite video stuff coming up. And they've become sort of a de facto voice amongst, let's say, Christian conservatives, for people who are, sounding the alarm on certain things. And so there's lots coming out, and it's just growing exponentially all the time. So as things change in technology, I think we're going to start to see a bifurcation of new video streaming services, because even places like Rumble are starting to censor, obviously, of course they are, they're money makers. So it's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen. So there's lots of really good stuff coming out from LifeSite, and I'm learning how to write as a journalist, not as an essayist. It's very difficult. My editor yesterday, she said, you're going to have to learn how to be dry when you write. And she says, don't worry, there's many different flavors of dry. And she said she said it's very uncomfortable, and yeah, so that's what I'm learning as well. So look out for, with the Canadian election coming up too, it's going to be daily articles about what's going on. So
awesome,
lots coming.
Well, Kennedy is also a contributing editor to 1 Peter 5, and so Kennedy has his hand in every pickle jar that's out there, and so you can send your essays to me. We'll
that's where I get to pretend to be G.K. Chesterton is on 1 Peter 5.
Yeah. When you're it's just too dry for you, and you need a little zing.
Yeah,
just send it over to 1 Peter 5. Excellent. Well, let's talk about the big, huge news, and that is that there was an fantastic documentary that was released on Sunday. If you have not already seen it, let me see if I can put this thing up here. It is episode 1 of the Mass of the Ages trilogy. Let's see. This is so funny. Many of Catholic viewers get a little behind the scenes. This backdrop right here is my house.
Really?
Yeah.
How did that happen?
So this is my house. Cameron's filming in my house right here. So that's a behind the scenes little look there. But this documentary currently has 91,000 views.
Yeah, it's huge.
And it's phenomenal. it's Cameron O'Hearn. He knows how to make a good film.
It's really an amazing. I was astonished at they could have gone a couple different routes with this. They could have stayed away from, let's say, being explicitly traditional. They could have just said, look at the Latin Mass, it's just so aesthetic and beautiful, and that's why we should love it, and it's all great. But they actually, I mean, they have the personal interest story of the woman in there with her family and things, and it's a masterpiece as far as film IQ goes. I think you could show this film to somebody who is Novus Ordo attending or not even Catholic, and they would be dumbfounded by how beautiful it was. And that's almost like a vehicle to bring in the harder truths of the faith. But there's this paradox in Catholicism, how you can be in the most beautiful building you could ever imagine, whatever, even just a small chapel that's got the traditional beauty in it. But at the same time, the focal point is the saddest event in human history, which is somehow the happiest event in human history. It's the paradox of the Catholic life. It's sadness and joy at 100% at the same time. And this documentary, I think, perfectly encapsulates that with the aesthetic magnificence of what you see. The filming really is top notch, but at the same time, the somber nature of the sacrificial nature of the Mass and the reality of sin and judgment and stuff is right in there, and it just fits effortlessly. So I'd like to know did they have a spiritual guide or someone helping them do this film, or was it just their own ideas?
Yeah, there is a spiritual director for the film, for the trilogy.
Good. Yeah.
And it obviously has a number of priests involved, as you saw in the interviews, as well as a number of bishops involved. And I didn't know that Bishop Strickland was actually in it. I thought there was 2 bishops from Lincoln, but there's also Bishop Strickland as well. Mm-hmm. So a number of different priests, some lay scholars, and then just some laymen, just sharing their stories and their experiences. I loved one of my favorite parts was the montage of the prayers at the foot of the altar.
Yes.
Where it was just, I think it was Father Dave Nix's voice, but whoever was praying the prayers at the foot of the altar. And then it was just a silent montage of images. And yes, and our own Pride of the Midwest was featured, St. John Cantius. Oh. That's the jewel of the Midwest in Chicago. Beautiful Polish parish, and the parish priest of St. John Cantius was in the documentary. Mm-hmm. So that was fantastic. What were some of your favorite parts, Kennedy?
I'm a big Fulton Sheen fan, so my eyes were not dry. I've got to admit here, okay, guys, this is the first time I ever cried in my life, just so you know. My eyes, I was watching this film, we were laying in bed, watched it on the laptop, my wife and I, and she just looks over me, just constant dripping from my eyeballs of just, it was when the various parts when Fulton Sheen's voice is being played, and there's sort of the subtitle. I got to watch it again because it was so good. But the titles coming out on the screen and sort of the silence of moving through the church with the filming and stuff, and the sound of his voice. Obviously, he was such a great preacher. It shook me. It struck me to the core. Where again, I couldn't. I don't know how they could have done a better job of encapsulating the depth and the seriousness of the Mass, which was only matched by the beauty of it at the same time. And it was awe-inspiring. It was amazing. These men that made this film, we interviewed on my Kennedy Profession show, Jonathan, one of the Cameron's more of the editor, or more of the film expert, I think, and Jonathan is has a different role. These men are going to have a major future in filmmaking and independent filmmaking. They really are. I mean,
oh yeah,
you could say, can you make me a car commercial? And they would make you the best car commercial you could imagine, just the skill set of these guys. And this is what we have to do as Catholics. You have to do this. Hollywood is a wasteland. I mean, sure, the odd movie comes out that's fun and that's nice if you can watch it and that's entertaining. But we're going to have to. They've shown us the way. The guy who made Chosen did a similar thing. And that obviously, that series, some people like it, some people don't. I haven't seen the whole thing. I don't know. But that way is the only way you're going to go, where you're going to have to get people who are into the thing you're making. They're going to have to fund it. Because this whole big studio mainstream thing, you can't do it anymore. It's just too immoral. It's too bad. It's too bad. But this shows that they can make a world-class, this skill set, if these guys were making something about a weird, I don't know, strange, immoral theme, they would be winning a prize at Cannes or something like that. Film festival, the Toronto International Film Festival. They'd be winning for their actual talent. Like, they have that level of skill, but they did it for good. So I think this is an amazing example that the way forward is going to be funding projects like this. And this is just the beginning. I mean, there's 100,000 views. It's only going to grow. This is something that the views of it are going to grow. It's going to snowball. It's not going to be like a current event video that's released where the first couple days they get 100,000 and it peters off. No, this is going to be a snowballing effect. And this is going to be something that's perennially available. And as each episode comes out, it's going to be more. So these guys are guys to watch because their career, I think, is just going to explode.
Yeah, I just looked up the line from the letter of Pope Francis accompanying the motu proprio, which is where he says he desires that they should discontinue the erection of new personal parishes tied to the Latin Mass, which are tied more to the desire and wishes of individual priests than to the real need of the holy people of God. This film was a lay effort. Cameron O'Hearn is a layman, so he's not a priest. And they raised $200,000 out of the pockets of laymen to make this movie. And so this is an example of a totally lay effort. Obviously, like I said, there's spiritual direction involved, but this is a lay effort of the holy people of God, if you want to call it that, put it that way.
They love that term. This is
not a some effort of some priest to impose his nostalgia on an unwilling young generation. But this is a zealous young generation came out of their pockets, just like our forefathers. Talk about New France. Our forefathers in the faith in the Americas sacrificed to build beautiful churches of God. They were immigrants. They didn't have anything. They had nothing. And they sacrificed to build beautiful churches of God in the Americas to really be, in many ways, just a glimmer of the type of beauty that exists in Europe, in the fatherland, but still raising these great monuments to God's greater glory. And this film is a monument in another way, a monument of beauty, which was made through the sacrifices of the people of God, these lay people who love the sacred traditions of our forefathers. And not only for nostalgia's sake, but as the film shows, it's done wonders to the spiritual lives of lay and cleric alike.
talk about new evangelization. This is, I mean, it's such an annoying term because it means whatever you want it to mean. But this is what it would be. It's using the methods that we have today to do something brilliant. And this is exactly what happened. And the timing is actually John Henry Weston just did a show interviewing one of the fellas about, and this was, it came out like last Friday or something. And it was, did you plan this timing? Did you have some sort of insider information that Pope Francis was going to try to suppress the Latin? I mean, did you have all this in the back of your mind and you thought we're going to release this film when it's most relevant? They had no idea. There's the hand of God is behind this movement in general of the traditional movement, but also of the release of this film. And I will say, what I'm excited about too is, see, priests playing hockey.
I love these rigid priests. They're so rigid.
Yeah, we had an Assumption Festival on Sunday, and our rigid priest was doing things like, asking the children catechism questions and giving them candy and playing water balloon fights and potato sack races. I mean, these rigid trads, they're just no fun. They never have any fun. Let's be honest. If there are any problems in the traditionalist movement, it's a negativity, right? That's just the reality. I mean, we live in a conspiracy. We get it. We live in a conspiracy. If you're a traditional Catholic, it's from Fatima to Benini to, I mean, the things. It's like, yeah, you live in the Catholic Alex Jones world. That's your reality, and it's all true. So it can be easy to forget that what happens at every mass or what happens in the faith, it really is the greatest triumph of heaven over hell. I mean, it's a remarkable reality that we have to remind ourselves of. And I wish this lockdown would end, and it doesn't. So it's the gift that keeps on giving as far as things for me to talk about. And we were talking to friends because, man, it's a tough time for us here, and we're trying to figure out what to do in our lives. Everyone is. And a friend of ours had such good advice, and she just said, as much as you can. For me, it's hard because it's my job. I have to know what's going on. I literally get paid to talk about it. But just detach yourself as much as you can from the world, as much as is prudent, and just really dive into the faith, really consume the faith. And this film, I think, reminds us as traditional Catholics, I won't give it away, but the human interest piece with following that woman. I mean, just wow. Like, again, marketing 101, film school 101, how to suck in the viewers and get them hooked 101. These guys nailed it with that. I mean, I didn't see that coming at all. Anyway. We have to recognize as traditional Catholics that I was talking to Mike from RTF. We were texting back and forth the other day, and he said beauty will convert the world. It will. People are starving for it. They're tired of pornography and just the mundane and saccharine nature of fake art nowadays, and abstract art and whatever the heck that's supposed to be, and slam poetry, which is the death of art. They're just tired of these imitations, these cheap parlor tricks that pretend to be art nowadays. And the most beautiful thing on earth is the Catholic faith, and that's why the most beautiful art you'll ever find anywhere in the world is the Catholic faith, and it's either original or it's preserved the greatest natural law traditions that have been found in the ancient world and pagan world for people that were looking for what they found in the church. And this film, I know I'm gushing a little bit about it, but it floored me with how beautiful the cinematography was and the churches that they chose. So bravo to these gentlemen, and I can't wait for the next 2 episodes.
Yeah, this is something that I discussed in my book, in the way that the divine grace of the sacraments was planted in all of these different peoples throughout history with the Christian faith as this mustard seed, which comes into a culture and cleanses it from the demonic elements within it, cleanses those things, and then transfigures what was good in it before the gospel, elevates it to a transformative society, so that souls in society are being transformed in Christ. And this is what creates this great beauty, Beauty is the logos
Yes.
of what man creates in imitation of what God creates. God creates is beauty, because God is beauty,
Yes.
and God creates beautiful things.
Mhm.
And man imitates his creator by creating beauty both visually and audibly. And then there's a corresponding corollary, a corollary with ugliness. There's an
Yes.
ugliness which is an imposition of your own will or your own power onto the order of God's beauty, which ultimately turns out to make it ugly. This film is the perfect thing to send to your, regular Catholic uncle who's like, why do you go to the Latin Mass? That's weird. Right there. Oh, here's Mary says, beauty is truth, truth is beauty. That is all ye know on earth and all ye need to know.
Yeah. Keats.
That's Keats. Encapsulates much of what is central to the TLM.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the traditional Latin Mass with other traditional apostolic rites of the church is expressing visibly and audibly the metaphysical beauty of Logos incarnate.
Yeah.
And that is what causes our souls to rise and transcend towards our heavenly homeland.
You know who nailed this the other day, of all people? Tucker Carlson.
Yeah.
I actually maybe when I'm done my diatribe and you talk, I'll search for it on YouTube and you put it in the chat, because he's been in Hungary, which is a very fascinating country right now. Resisting the world, essentially, is what they're doing, and pray for their leader, Orban. I believe he's a Reformed Christian or something of his youth, and he rededicated himself to the Christian idea, which is good. And but Hungary, obviously, Holy Roman Empire and the Hungarian Catholic history. But in any case, Tucker Carlson was in Hungary for the last. He was there for a week or two. There's a big movement there to make that the center of the right wing political movement, but it's not North American neocon stuff. It's actually like traditionalism in a political sense. And I was watching Tucker Carlson. He gave this 8-minute impromptu speech. It was, it wasn't part of his show. And he went on and on, he went on and on about architecture and the beauty. He basically said, the thing I love most about Budapest and this city, he just said, it's pretty. Like he just said, it's pretty. I can't believe how pretty this place is. And he said, this is something we don't understand in America, in North America. Everything is about functionality. And he went on to say a lot of things, but he said one thing is, yes, okay, wealth is good and progress of technology can make your life better. And he says, but I would give all of it up for beauty, is basically what he said. And this wasn't some sort of scripted thing on his show. This was just him speaking from the heart. And, he said what you're saying about the mustard seed of beauty and truth that's in the human heart, which was in cultures before Christ. He said, he was in Japan one time, and he jokes, he says, I'm Episcopalian. He's like, I don't even know what a shrine is. But he goes to some sort of shrine to something in Japan, has no idea what it is, but he just is struck by it, and he goes, my goodness, that's beautiful. He says, it's like beauty when you see it. And he talked about how you can build things in a way that elevate people's minds and hearts. And that's what traditional Christendom and even the warm pagan cultures sought to do, because they understood that implicitly. Whereas we don't do that. I mean, not just in the church anymore, but in society. Michael Jones has talked about the Bauhaus architecture and how that's infiltrated the Western mind, and everything's about functionality and everything's about cars and whatever, and fine. But it's interesting to see that as ugly as things get, you even have a guy like Tucker Carlson, who I like. Tucker Carlson. I know not everybody likes everything he says, but I think he's pretty smart. And it's interesting, the hopes and dreams of conservatism of the West were sort of dashed last year when you realized that the thing was not just unfair, but basically rigged. And so it's cool how it's forced us to go back to, even politically, to go to our roots. And you see this amongst a lot of men who are, let's say, political, philosophical commentators, who are not even necessarily Catholic or Christian, but they're being forced to say, okay, there's got to be something deeper at the root of this whole thing. And what is that thing? So they're rediscovering Plato, and they're rediscovering Aristotle, and they're rediscovering Seneca, and these sort of great saints. And it's remarkable to see that the human heart can only handle so much of what's happening right now. And there's a natural inclination to find the true, the good, and the beautiful. And that ultimately will lead souls to the church, because that's where they'll find it in the fullness. When they study, like John Henry Newman said, he says, not only, you cease to be Protestant when you study history. It's more than that. You cease to be an atheist when you study history. You cease to be a negative. You cease to be a nihilist. When you study history, you are smacked in the face with the hand of God doing the impossible at every single turn. I mean, who understood this? Gavin McInnes, the comedian, controversialist. He talked about one time why he converted to Catholicism. I have no idea where he is in his piety, but God bless him. And he said one reason was because of beauty. He was in a church in New York, just checking out what Mass was, Novus Ordo, but just that the church still had the beauty. And he looked around, and he just was staring at, like, if you've ever really looked at one of those churches, you'll find, like, behind a corner of a wall, there's golden leaf encrusted something that no one will ever see. But he said somebody clearly spent like weeks doing that. And he's like, he was thinking about the Polish immigrant or the Irish immigrant 150 years ago, hanging from a roof in an unsafe setting, and decided to spend, 80 hours a week doing this little thing. And he says, he just, for him, it was a realization that this is impossible. This isn't possible. It's not possible that these guys could have done this without the hand of God behind them. And that's what you see when you look at the history and the faith.
Yeah, totally. I found this is a screenshot from St. John Cantius, the beautiful church there, the high altar. Let me read a passage from Dietrich von Hildebrand. This is Aesthetics, Volume 1. His last text, which I think is so powerful. Dietrich von Hildebrand, doctor of the church of the 20th century, from my view. His first language was actually Italian. He was born in Florence. He grew up in Florence, and his father was a German sculptor. And he was surrounded by beauty in Florence and Italy his whole life. And but then encountering the ugliness of national socialism, of communism, later the ugliness of the American empire. He fled to America in 1946 and lived the rest of his days in America. And right before he died in 1977 or 77, he wrote his final text, which is a 1,000-page treatise on beauty. And in this text, in the English translation, page 6, volume 1, he says this: contact with an environment permeated by beauty not only offers real protection against impurity, baseness, every kind of letting oneself go, brutality, and untruthfulness. It has also the positive effect of raising us up in a moral sense. It does not draw us into a self-centered pleasure where our only wish is to indulge ourselves. On the contrary, it opens our hearts, inviting us to transcendence and leading us in conspectu Dei, before the face of God. Naturally, this last point applies above all to the high, exalted beauty, what Kant calls the sublime, das Erhaben, and which he contrasts with the beautiful. But even in little things that are charming and graceful, even in the more modest, beautiful things, one can find a trace of the pure and the noble. This may perhaps not lead us in conspectu Dei, but it does fill us with gratitude to God. It frees us from captivity in our egoistic interests and undoes the fetters of our hearts, releasing us, even if only for a short time, from the wild passions that convulse them. I thought that was a great text because there's when I was in Chicago for the first time, and I went to St. John Cantius, and all I did was just come into the nave, and just coming into the nave of the church and seeing the beauty of the nave, this incredible cathedral. It was so breathtaking that I just had to, I just was overwhelmed with the beauty of God. And I just had to fall on my knees and worship God. And that's the type of beauty that von Hildebrand, I think, is talking about, even in the smallest little things, all the way up to the great sublime beauties. And that's really the power of beauty for the human heart and soul.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I'm going to, you asked me in the private chat if we've had any images of St. Joseph Oratory in Quebec. Unfortunately, St. Joseph Oratory in Quebec was changed after the council a bit. It's still an amazing building.
I thought it was which one is that chapel that the SSPX has?
Oh, that was Saint Césaire. Yes.
Oh, okay. I
I
confused it, I guess.
But
okay.
But I did send you in the chat a link to the images of there is a Notre Dame in Montreal, and it's sort of a other version of the one in France. So I sent you that if you want to pull up some of those images, because still to this day it's in Montreal. It's one of the most beautiful places you'll ever go on earth. It is. It's been untouched. Luckily, I think there's a table altar in it, but everything else is still there. So you can just see there. I mean, look at that. What is that? That's not Earth. It's like there's just something about that where that wasn't built, from a 3D printer. That wasn't you know what I'm saying? Like that was built before there was electricity. People understand that, right? One of the greatest. This is why they have to erase the history of the Catholic Church from history, because when you look back at the history of the Catholic Church and you look at the buildings and the monuments and things, you realize, oh, those so-called, Dark Ages people were actually the most intelligent people who ever lived, in a way, because my goodness, how could you do that without AutoCAD, or how could you do that without, cement trucks and, electronic tools and power tools. You could, I don't know. They did it. It was all based on human effort, just fueled by a desire to do something beautiful. Yeah. So I'm trying to find also Tucker Carlson's speech here, the actual highlight. Oh, here it is.
What is the but what's the chapel that because we featured that chapel in our talk on French Catholicism in North America with Cologne. Remember that? And there's that great mosaic of the death of Saint Joseph. You know that one?
Yeah, Saint Césaire.
I thought you texted me the photos. Didn't you?
I did, but I have my dumb phone now, and I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't.
Well,
but I'll find it.
Everyone, if you go to just search French Catholicism, meaning of Catholic, there's a talk that Kennedy and I talked with Mr. Charles Coulomb about French Catholicism in North America, both Canada and Louisiana, Haiti. But there's some slides that we put in of the it's the Chapel of Saint Césaire.
Yeah.
Is that
so
it?
Here, yeah. So here, I'll send you the link right now.
Okay.
And here's the link to them, and then the images. You just search the images, or sorry, just scroll the images. They're right there. It's called the St. Joseph
Center. Okay.
St. Joseph Center.
Okay.
There's actually a movie film there.
Yeah. You mentioned that. Has that come out yet?
Not yet. It hasn't been released yet.
Yeah, because you got a showing of it, and it was very good.
It was really good.
You said.
And it's fun. There's the images there. It's funny because the filmmakers were looking for a Catholic. They have no idea what the Society of St. Pius X is, whatever. So they just found this place So it's kind of like a little infiltration. It's like, oh, you didn't know what we were. We're here anyway. But yeah, there's the death of Saint Joseph. The people call it the Passion of Saint Joseph.
Oh no, I lost it again.
That's all right.
Yeah, it's yeah, I love this. I love this death of Saint Joseph. It's awesome.
And this chapel is, these pictures are amazing, but I was in it when it was dark, and the way that it's lit up, they have like electronic lights, but they've placed them in such a way where they almost, it's almost as if they're made to bring out the colors of everything, so it looks unbelievable while you're in there in the dark. I've said this before, but how could you ever? I don't understand after the council, and how could you ever paint over something like that? You know, how could you just take a white primer and put it over things like that? That happened in so many churches.
Yeah,
I can't
terrible
understand
iconoclasm.
It's remarkable. But
well,
anyway.
So this film, we need to share this film. This is such a great evangelistic tool in our modern world that loves images. Yeah. And I think it's so beautiful to take technology, which in many ways was designed to enslave us to passions, and to reverse that role to provide beautiful images of Christ and the saints.
Yeah.
And the worship of God.
You know what? Let's end here. I have one quote. We didn't really end up getting to, well, this is like a lot of things with St. Joseph. We talked about everything that's important to him. It's like, you know, we talk about dad without talking about dad. That's kind of normal. And
yeah, and dad's okay with that. He just
okay
wants his kids to
be happy.
You know, have their goods and have what they need.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what's great about being a dad. You can just kind of fade in the background.
Yeah.
And it's so much, it's like St. Joseph holding us up.
Pretty much. And we need that, especially here in Canada today. And but here's something from Pope Leo XIII. It's from Quamquam Pluries from August 15th, the Assumption, 1889. And he says, the dignity of the Mother of God is so elevated that there can be no higher created one. But since St. Joseph was united to the Blessed Virgin by the conjugal bond, there is no doubt that he approached nearer than any other to that supereminent dignity of hers by which the Mother of God surpasses all created natures. Conjugal union is the greatest of all. By its very nature, it is accompanied by a reciprocal communication of the goods of the spouses. If then God gave St. Joseph to Mary to be her spouse, he certainly did not give him merely as a companion in life, a witness of her virginity, a guardian of her honor, but he made him also participate by the conjugal bond in the eminent dignity which was hers. So you want to know the Blessed Mother better, which you should want to know St. Joseph better. And if you want to know all three of the Holy Family, you can pick up a devotion to the Holy Family, which was, we'll call it a Canadian devotion just to grift that for my own sake. And please, we didn't even really talk about this book, Consecration of St. Joseph. It's not mine. I didn't write it. Father Holloway did. I have never done the actual consecration all the way through, but I've sort of read it. Here. Yeah, it's good.
Get a screenshot. Here, you hold it up. I'll hold it up. Then somebody can screenshot this and share it.
It's a good one. Yeah, it's a very good one. Even just a devotional read. Like, I've never done the 30-day. I didn't do it. I just haven't had. It just hasn't worked out. But I've read it periodically as a thing to just read spiritual reading, and there's lots of good stuff in it.
Yeah, it's a great text.
And it's got the best. One of the things that's great about it, along with Terror of Demons, which is being republished in November, just the tidbits about Saint Joseph and the citations of, you know, who said what about him. It's a one-stop shop.
Excellent. Well, we're all out of time here today, so thank you for listening. Tuning into the Terror of Demons morning show. Once again, don't forget to sign up for the Kennedy Profession at the Crusade channel, and you can become a patron of Meaning of Catholic, get a free copy of City God versus City of Man, which is out this October, God willing. So let's offer up our Father for Canada, for the soul of Canada to be reborn as the as the church has been reborn in so many ways, we think especially of the French Revolution and how it was a genocide against Catholics.
Mm-hmm.
After a few centuries of rebellion of the French church against the Council of Trent, and God punishing the French with the French Revolution. And yet there was a great French Catholic revival after the French Revolution, which was really quite life from the dead. And so we know that Canada can also arise and have a similar revival. So we pray for saints to arise, especially saints to arise to preach the gospel, to lead the people of God to the altar of God, where we can offer God the sacrifice of praise in union with the passion of Christ. Let's pray. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Pater noster, qui es in celis, sanctificetur nomen tuum, adveniat regnum tuum, fiat voluntas tua, sicut in cielo et in terra.
Panem nostrum quotidianum da nobis hodie, dimitti nobis debita nostra, sicut et nos dimittimus debitoribus nostris, ne nos inducas in tentationem, sed libera nos a malo. Amen.
In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Jesus is King.
Into